far exceeds any of those what we have so-called epidemics. What makes this very unique and why I became interested in it is that what we know now is that most of these people right here didn't decide one day that they were going to, I don't know, try to get high as a kite. Crack cocaine is against the law, right? So at some point, somebody woke up and said, you know what? I am going to mess up my life I'm going to mess up the rest of my life, and I'm going to try to smoke crack cocaine. And that's a lifestyle choice. It ruined a lot of families, and it ruined a lot of neighborhoods. But this number 42,000 right here, most of those people got started because they went to a doctor. They went to a doctor who prescribed them hydrocodone, oxycodone, Percocets, Oxycontin, anything along those lines. And those people didn't know when they went to the doctor that they have that addictive gene in them, that once they started taking it, that they couldn't stop. And I'm going to show you some slides in a little bit where you're going to see where the doctors knew and the pharmaceutical companies knew that the people that were going to take these pills were going to become addicts. So where my sympathy comes in with this number is that most of those people didn't make a lifestyle choice. Most of those people wanted to go get rid of whatever pain they had, and they went to a person that they thought was an expert. And so that is how this problem grew out of control. Without getting on my soapbox too much, once we start seeing some of the numbers, we start recognizing that sort of the corporate greed took over and allowed this problem to grow into the problem that we have nowadays. And once we created addicts, the dope dealers recognized that they had this huge pool of people that needed to be fed narcotics. So this is what it looks like a little bit. Like in 2015, the darker the color, the more overdose deaths we had in that part of the country. So if you want your family not to run the risk of being exposed to opioids or opioid death, live somewhere in the heartland and become a farmer, because right there in the middle where we grow all the fruit and vegetables and cattle, we just don't tend to see it over there. But the more populated the area is, we start looking at the northeast part of the country, the worse the overdose death rate is. So this number should even scare us more. The University of Pittsburgh School of Health Science, they did a study, and what they found out is that number 42,000, which by all experts is an epidemic, that number is underreported by 70,000. So when we talk about 42,000 people dying in 2016, that number actually is 112,000. That number is underreported by 160%. So the number of people that pass away from opioid addiction and overdoses is just phenomenal. It's just through the roof crazy. So here in Harris County, so how does it apply to us? Here in Harris County, from January 1st to April 30th, we had 81 people die from an opioid overdose. And that number is sort of a lot, right? I mean, it's a significant number. These are people, out of these 81, most of those people got started, not because they wanted to sit there and find out what it was like to get high. Most of those people got started because they went to a doctor. They had a hip replacement, they had a knee replacement. Maybe they gave childbirth, or maybe they went to the doctor or the dentist to have a root canal done, and they prescribed them hydrocodone. And those people start taking it, and the next thing you know, they can't stop. Anybody ever had a prescription for 9 days worth of hydrocodone or Oxycontin or Percocets? If you had a hip replacement or some real major surgery, you had a prescription for 9 days or longer, you have a 24% chance of becoming addicted. 1 out of 4 people that get a prescription for 9 days will become addicted. 1 out of 4. That's a crazy number. If you get a prescription for 1 day, like if you have a wisdom tooth pulled, you have a root canal done, the doctor gives you a prescription for hydrocodone, go to the doctor, you get 2 for that 1 day period for 24 hours. You run a 9% chance of becoming addicted. Or 1 out of 11 people that get a prescription for 1 day will become addicted. That's a huge number. Just think of it, the 11 people the doctor sees in that day and gives a prescription to, the doctor knows that one of those people is going to go home and know that their life will be changed forever. And there's a part of me that thinks that the doctors just wouldn't want to do that. But they do. 1 out of 11. 1 out of 11 people they see and they give a prescription to will never be the same again. And not just that person, but their families, their neighbors. This neighborhood, probably more than some other neighborhoods. You guys have experienced what the crack epidemic did to a neighborhood. It took a generation out of a neighborhood. Family units became dysfunctional because men went to jail and women couldn't handle raising kids. And so when I'm sit there and I talk to other groups all the time and I say like, I mean, this is ruining families. Yeah, I'm sure it is. But you guys truly probably recognize how devastating this is. And the numbers from the crack epidemic don't even come close to what is happening right now. So it's scary. Think of it this way, if you really want to get scared and you think that 81 is a large number, now that we know that they're underreported by 160%, this number is more like 200 for a 4-month period. That means that we're going to have over 600 people die this year from an opioid overdose. That is more than get killed or murdered in the city of Houston. It's a big problem. So there's a Rice football player that died from a carfentanil overdose. It was in the news about a month and a half ago. And I've talked to the dad of, his name is Blaine Padgett, the football player that died. And he is a perfect example on what happened to, what is happening to society. Blaine Padgett is a scholarship athlete at Rice University. He has shoulder surgery because he wants to he hurt his shoulder playing football, and the university paid for him to have surgery, and the pain just doesn't go away, so the doctor starts prescribing opioids. And the pain continued. And Blaine wanted to make sure that he could continue to play football because that was going to pay for his scholarship. And once the doctor stopped prescribing it, he still had the need because he couldn't stand the pain, and he knew that the opioids were going to work. So he bought what he thought was a hydrocodone pill from a friend of his. It wasn't a real hydrocodone pill. It was made in a garage somewhere. It looked like a hydrocodone. It tasted like a hydrocodone. But when he took it, it turned out it was filled with carfentanil, which is one of the opioids. And we're going to show you a little bit how strong carfentanil is. This 270-pound football player took 1 pill, went to sleep, and didn't wake up the next morning. That's how dangerous these pills are. So what is fentanyl? Fentanyl is sort of the buzzword that we always talk about, because that's what we talk about on the news. If you watch the news, they talk about like fentanyl this and fentanyl that, and fentanyl is bad. Fentanyl is just a part of the opioid family that causes all the problems. But fentanyl itself is actually not bad. It's the illegal use of fentanyl that's really bad. So fentanyl is used to treat breakthrough cancer pain. Right? So doctors give fentanyl to patients that are probably going to pass away with cancer. And personally, I could care less if that person became addicted or was high as a kite when they passed away. Because I am 100% on board with people not having to die in pain. There's no need for that. We have medicines that can prevent that from happening. Fentanyl is one of them. When morphine doesn't work on someone, they give them fentanyl. The problem is that market is very small. I mean, there's a lot of people, but if you're a big pharmacy company, that's a sort of a very defined market. So the pharmacy companies started realizing what they needed to do is convince doctors to not only prescribe fentanyl and some of the other opioids like hydrocodone and Percocets and Oxycontin and stuff for breakthrough cancer pain. They also convinced doctors to prescribe it for chronic pain. Well, what is chronic pain? It's sort of just growing older. You know, when that knee hurts when we get out in the morning, and we got to flex it for a little bit, our back is hurting us. That's chronic pain. You know, maybe some more exercise would work, or maybe some other thing. You know, maybe eat a little less. Maybe we can solve it that way. But the doctors started prescribing opioids to start treating chronic pain. That market is huge. We all grow older. None of us want to say if the choice is between not feeling pain or having to run a mile in Houston hot summer weather, then people start, you know, what else do I have to do? And that's where the problem became. So this is, where do we find it? These are all examples of pills, and what's an 825, that's a hydrocodone pill. We find it in heroin, black tar heroin, Vicodins, Percocets, all that stuff. We find fentanyl, the illegal form of it, it comes as a powder. We find it in every type of narcotic that's on the street. In the northeast part of the country, we find fentanyl in heroin. The reason why, if you're a dope dealer, you want to maximize profits, right? So heroin is very expensive. You break it up into smaller packages and you sell it, but it's very expensive. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It's made in a factory. You don't need a farmer in a field. You don't need a guy to work your crops. You just need a machine to mix chemicals together. So fentanyl is very cheap. So what the dope dealers realize is that, hey, I'll take some of the real heroin out and I now put some fentanyl into it. Fentanyl is much more potent than heroin, and I can stretch my supply of heroin much, much further. So it became a money issue for dope dealers. The problem is none of those guys are scientists. So when they cut a little heroin out and replace with fentanyl, if they use just a little bit of too much fentanyl, people start overdosing because that's just how dangerous it is. So this is just a little graph to show how this problem came about. With the green line, so this is people dying from any opioid, and then methadone right here is sort of a steady line. Methadone is a medicine that doctors prescribe to people that are addicted to heroin and that are trying to maintain sort of a regular lifestyle. They're trying to go to work. Methadone, the problem with methadone is that you have to be on it for the rest of your life. Those people that are heroin addicts and that are on methadone have to go to a clinic every day, because for people like you and I, methadone is actually very dangerous because it is an opioid. It actually, it sort of mimics all the things that heroin does. You just don't get quite as high on it. But if we look at the lines, the number of deaths right here, about 2013, all of a sudden it just shot through the roof. And then we see the same thing with the synthetic opioids, which is fentanyls. And there's a direct correlation between the number of people die and the introduction of synthetic opioids into the marketplace. So how did it get started, though? I touched on it a little bit. And so we're going to watch a little video. And then we're all going to laugh, and some may even remember it.
How often does your job call you out of bed in the middle of the night? Well, if you were a doctor, it would be often. And generally, there isn't much time to spare.
Happy, Doctor?
Oh, fine. Have a camel with you, folks. Thanks. You know, this night work's kind of rough, isn't it? That's right. But a camel's always a pleasure. Yes, folks, the pleasing mildness of a camel is just as enjoyable to a doctor as it is to you or me. In a nationwide survey, doctors in all branches of medicine were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" The brand name most was Camel. Tens of thousands of doctors, general practitioners, surgeons, specialists, doctors in every branch of medicine were included. And according to this nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Try Camels yourself, the cigarette so many doctors enjoy.
So we probably now, when we watch it, we sort of snicker a little bit because we all now know that cigarette smoking is bad for your health. So why do you think why do you think Camel cigarettes use doctors? It's a commercial from the 1960s. So why do you think Camel cigarettes use doctors to try to sell their cigarettes? Because we trust them. I mean, when I go to the doctor and I tell the doctor, I say, "Doctor, it hurts when I do this." Right? There's two things the doctor can tell me. First, what? Don't do that. Right? Or the second is, take 2 of these for the next 10 days and let's see if it goes away. Right? Is he fixing my problem or is he hiding my problem? He's hiding my problem. When oftentimes, and I'm sure that you guys have seen it, when you go to the doctor and you complain about something, they don't really sometimes try to figure out why it's happening. They're going to give you something to make the symptoms go away and then just sort of hope that maybe the problem goes away. Right? Well, the problem oftentimes doesn't go away. And when we know from the statistics that by giving me that medicine for just a couple of days that I run a chance of becoming an addict, don't you think that the doctors would maybe not do that? I mean, so Camel cigarettes figured out in the 60s, if we use doctors to market our product, people will buy it because we all want to believe our doctors. The guys go to school for 12 years after college. Of course, they're not going to sit there and do something that's bad for us. As it turns out, they do. Yeah. I mean, imagine what would have happened to the Camel brand if they said 9 out of 10 congressmen smoke Camel cigarettes. What do you think would have happened to the Camel brand? It would have gone bankrupt, or it would have gone out of business after about the second year. None of us really trust a congressman, right? I mean, we sit there and listen to him, but we always sort of like, hey, I'll listen to you, but I'm going to hang on to my wallet. But doctors, we just want to trust doctors. It's in us. And the cigarette factories, the cigarette manufacturers realize that. That's why they use them. So this is what happened. West Virginia, of all the states in this country, West Virginia has been hit worse with this opioid epidemic than any other place. And this is an example of how badly things got. So what kind of industry, what kind of work do people do in West Virginia? There's all kinds of work, but there's one that just probably is more prevalent than any other kind of work. What do people in West Virginia do? Coal mining. Coal mining, and that is hard work. You go into the bottom of that pit, you spend 12 hours over there, you come out, you're covered in coal, and then the next day you got to come back and do it again. And the problem with blue-collar jobs like that is that if you don't work, you don't get paid. And those people got families. And if you quit your job because your back is hurting so badly, somebody else is going to want to do it because the unemployment rate was just so bad in West Virginia. So the doctors started prescribing opioids over there because people needed back surgeries, but they couldn't take time off. And so this congressional report that came out at the end of January of this year, these are some of the numbers that they found in West Virginia. In a 10-year period, so you have pharmaceutical companies and you have pharmaceutical distributors, right? So you have the drug maker and you have the drug pusher. Right? They make it over here, and then this guy right here puts it on a truck, and they bring it to the pharmacy. So in a 10-year period, 2 drug distributors shipped 10 million hydrocodone pills and 10 million oxycodone pills to a little pharmacy, to 2 little pharmacies in the town of Williams in Mingo County. It's a small town. 20 million pills went to a small town in West Virginia. That number is just crazy. To even Miami Lucan, which is one of the drug pushers, not the makers, but the pushers, shipped 5.7 million hydrocodone and oxycodone pills to a town of 400. Do you think that the doctors that were prescribing those pills knew that there was a problem when they were pushing it out at that kind of rate? And this is the ugly part of it all. So I can, not that I agree, because I don't really agree, but the pharmaceutical companies, they're in business to make money. Yeah, they don't want to make us feel better, but at the end of the day, if they have a product that's too expensive, they're not going to sell it because they're in the business of making money. So the pharmaceutical, and we have, I always thought, and in fact I know this for a fact, that the DEA has a group that's called the diversion group. What they do is look at shipments such as these, and they put a stop to it. There's something wrong when 5 million pills go to a town of only 400 people. That's wrong. There's no explanation that you can give me that is wrong. So the pharmaceutical companies realized that the DEA had a lot of power to interfere with their business model, right? Which is the ability of the federal government at the time, the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, to start looking at some of these shipments and just stopping it and saying, hey, enough's enough. What is going on? We're going to have to quit, stop, done. So what the pharmaceutical companies and the distributors decided to do is that they were going to sit there in court, every congressman and every senator, to convince them that the DEA should be stripped of its powers to try to regulate and control some of this stuff. And they were successful. They were so successful that every congressman and every senator voted to strip the DEA of its powers. Every congressman and senator. You think about all the animosity and the anger that is in Washington, this side of the aisle, that side of the aisle, we can't get along. And all of them agree to take power away from the DEA to sit there and be able to monitor the pharmaceutical companies? How much do you think that cost? We don't know because they don't have to, the lobbyists don't have to report how much they spend on trying to convince those people. But to me, it's astronomical that there's not one person that said, this is safe face. I know it's going to pass. But I'm just going to go ahead and say, hey, I think this is a bad idea. Wink, wink. That guy couldn't even step up to the plate. They all agreed that the DEA should not have the power. And I know that the DEA goes after illegal dope dealers. This was legal dope dealers that were creating hundreds and thousands of addicts, killing tens of thousands of people, and they had their power stripped from them. And that is, to me, it embarrasses. Part of it is just embarrassing that as a country, that was allowed to happen. We regulate everything else. My God, we pump gas. Everything is regulated. And then what is killing so many people, we strip power away from it. And we don't know how much money was spent on that. What we do know is how much money the pharmaceutical companies and the distributors spent on courting doctors to convince them to prescribe their medicines to their patients. Does anyone want to take a guess on how much money the pharmaceutical companies and the distributors spend to convince doctors to prescribe their medicines? Because that has to be reported. So we know, we have a number. Take a guess. Anybody? Millions. I would say add a couple of zeros to that.
No.
But how about this? $8.2 billion. Wow,
man.
So the pharmaceutical company would go to a doctor and say, hey, listen, if you prescribe Oxycontin or Percocets or hydrocodone, and we really appreciate that so much that you know what we're going to do? We're going to send you on an all-paid vacation to Mexico to speak at this little conference we have over there. Wink, wink. And if you continue to be a really good doctor, guess what you're going to do next year? This little conference is going to be in Hawaii, and you get to take your family. What do you think that doctor's going to do throughout the year? Oh, he's going to be prescribing a bunch of pills, right? They know this because one of the things that happened, they caught a pharmaceutical company got caught in this web. And right after the election, and regardless of where you stand in the politics, one of the things that Donald Trump did is he took out his pen and said, that is crazy. The DEA, you get your powers back. And so one of the things that happened, they started their investigations again, and they were able to get emails between the pharmaceutical companies and the doctors. And one of the doctors, emailing back and forth, the question to the pharmaceutical company was, the next time I go to the conference, is anybody even going to be there, or can I just get my dinner to go? He knew that the last time he talked, no one even showed up. He was paid $100,000 to go talk in a room where no one was, and he got his dinner to go. And so when that guy makes $100,000 in bribes, and that's what I call it, how likely is it that he's going to keep prescribing that same medicine, even if it's to people that don't really need it? There's a company out there that makes one product. The company's name is Insys Pharmaceutical Company. They make one product. They make a fentanyl spray. You spray it under your tongue, and it works just like the patch or the lollipop does. The only difference is that it works very, very quickly because, it's an easy way into your system. And the guy that started that company created the product. His name is John Kapoor, and he's in his 70s. And John's wife has cancer, and I feel sorry for her because that's got to be really bad. And John came up with the spray because the pills and the patches weren't working fast enough for his wife. So he came up with this really great product. The problem is John then realized that the market for the spray was very, very small. Breakthrough cancer patients. There's not that many around. Other people were selling other products. He just had a small piece of the pie. So he convinced the people that worked in this claims department that talked to the insurance companies and the doctors to convince doctors to use his fentanyl spray to prescribe it to people that had chronic pain, which is just growing older. John Kapoor's net worth ran up to $2.1 billion selling one product. One product. And that product probably killed more people than El Chapo Guzman did, pushing all the illegal cocaine into this country. And the federal government stood by and let it happen. That guy lived in a gated community in Arizona. When the new administration came in and the DEA got their power back, and within the DEA there were people that were complaining. They recognized how wrong things were. So when the power came back, the first person they went after was John Kapoor. He's been arrested, he's been charged, and the doctors that got caught in this web, they've all been charged too. And it's all in New York, New Jersey, and that part of the country because the people that made the drugs knew that that's where the money was going to be. So when I talk about this opioid epidemic, what pains me when I talk to people is having to admit that our government was somewhat complicit in it. They allowed it to happen. So this is a video. Purdue Pharma makes Oxycontin. And this is a little infomercial that they sent to doctors.
There's no question that our best, strongest pain medicines are the opioids, but these are the same drugs that have a reputation for causing addiction and other terrible things. Now, in fact, the rate of addiction amongst pain patients who are treated by doctors is much less than 1%. They don't wear out, they go on working, they do not have serious medical side effects. And so these drugs, which I repeat are our best, strongest pain medications, should be used much more than they are for patients in pain.
So he said everything that he said was opposite of what I just told you. Because this guy worked for Purdue Pharma, which is the manufacturer of Oxycontin, which is, Oxycontin is the medicine that sort of started this whole thing. The pharmaceutical companies that made other products realized, hey, look at Purdue Pharma, it's working for them. We're going to do the same thing. So the federal government actually sued Purdue Pharma. And Purdue Pharma is a privately held company. You can't buy stock in it because they're so successful, they don't need investor money. So the federal government sued Purdue Pharma, and they said, hey, we let you get by with a bunch of stuff, but that 20-second infomercial that you send to doctors is a flat-out lie, and you know it. And Purdue Pharma agreed to pay $600 million to the government to stop playing that video clip. That doctor that is working for Purdue Pharma is telling other doctors, you owe it to your patients. You owe it to them. If they come in and they tell you they're in pain, you owe it to them to prescribe our medicine. You know what doctor, what branch of medicine is the least likely to prescribe an opioid for pain? You know, when you think about all the brain, you have general practitioners and obstetricians and gynecologists and heart doctors and all this. What discipline of medicine is the least likely to prescribe an opioid? Huh? The most likely.
Oh.
The least likely, a pain management doctor.
Oh, yeah.
You know why? Because they know how bad it is for you. His area of expertise is pain management. And the last thing they want to do is get you addicted to an opioid. The most likely to prescribe it, a general practitioner. Because people come in there and they say, it hurts when I do this. Well, I tell you what we need to do. You know, when you get up in the morning, every morning, I want you to do, for 30 minutes, I want you to do arm raises, and I want you to, you know, move your leg. Doctor, can't you just give me something for this? No, I think if you start doing regular exercise, it'll go away. Well, I'm just going to go to another doctor that's going to give me what I need, and I'll never come see you again. In fact, nowadays, you know what I'm going to do too? I'm going to get on the computer and tell them that you don't even like your patients enough to make the pain go away. What do you think is going to happen to that doctor's practice? It's going to go away. So when patients come into these doctor's offices and they complain about it hurts when I do this, you know, I know what he needs. I mean, he needs exercise, but I know what he wants. It's a problem. So this is when we start talking about synthetic opioids. I mean, I came across this slide. I stole it from another doctor. Not another doctor, because I'm not a doctor at all. Just one on, like, every so often on Sunday afternoons. My wife likes me. I'm just kidding. So I stole this from a doctor. And this morphine has the value of 1. And what that means is we're going to compare everything that's on this list on how strong or how weak it is compared to morphine. And morphine is a pretty bad pain medicine, right? I mean, it manages the pain awful well. So codeine, right here at the bottom, is 1/10 the strength of morphine. And codeine, you guys in the neighborhoods, it's in the cough syrups and stuff like that. So it's an opioid. People like it. It makes them sort of lazy. It makes them sort of groovy. 1/10 the strength of morphine, yeah. Tramadol, 1/10 the strength of morphine. Hydrocodone, about half as strong as morphine. Morphine, again, remember, morphine is what we give soldiers in the field when they get shot to make the pain go away. So morphine, the value of 1. Morphine is the exact same strength as morphine, and this is where things become fascinating. Oxycodone, twice as strong. Oxycodone, we give that to people that have a toothache. We give that to people whose wisdom tooth is pulled. We give them something that's twice as strong as morphine. Hydromorphone, okay, U47-700. Anybody ever heard of U47-700? No? I'll talk about it in a few minutes. But that's almost 8 times as powerful as morphine. So here's one of the fentanyl families, 15 times more potent. Another family member, 20, another 25. And then fentanyl itself, which is what we see in a lot of these fake pills, is 100 times more potent than morphine. They're putting that in fake pills. That's what's killing people. Aquafentanyl, it's another family member of it's another member of the fentanyl family. Carfentanil. Dope dealers are putting carfentanil in pills. Carfentanil was in the pill that killed the Rice football player. Carfentanil is what's in pills that we have taken out of neighborhoods not too far from here. And those pills look exactly like a Percocet, a Xanax, a hydrocodone. But they didn't come from a pharmacy. They came from a guy that made them in his garage. So let's see how strong carfentanil is. Oh, gee.
Man, it keeps going.
Wow. It's over 10,000 times more potent than morphine. When these guys are in the garage with the pill press, the difference is between 1 and 2 granules. 1 granule will get you high, 2 will kill you. That garage is not some scientific laboratory where the measurements are absolutely correct. They're making these pills in the garage, and the dosages are so off that a person takes one of them, they go to sleep and they're done. They just won't ever wake up. So we have had carfentanil in Houston. That is 0.8 grams of carfentanil. Right? So 0.8 grams is, to give it a sense of perspective, a sweet and low packet is 1 gram. So this is less than a sweet and low packet. This amount right here is enough to kill 4,000 people. This was found in an apartment of a guy in Greenway Plaza who was addicted to fentanyl. I'm not even sure if he knew what he had, but he had it. So these are some of the things that we find. So the officer, when he charged somebody, thought that the person had hydrocodone, heroin, or oxycodone, or whatever. And here's what it actually was when we got the lab result back. And what is interesting is that, remember I told you guys about the U-47-700? Never heard of it, have you? But it turns out we're finding it on the streets. U-47-700 is a opioid sedative. It's just a synthetic opioid that some pharmacy company in the 70s was trying to experiment with. And they realized it really wasn't doing for them what they wanted it to do. So they had the formula, but they decided not to use it. And a lab in China got a hold of the formula and started making it. So what is unique about that is that U-47-700, until the end of 2016, was 100% legal to buy. And remember how much stronger U-47-700 is compared to morphine, almost 8 times stronger than morphine, and you could buy it and have it delivered to your front door without any repercussions. So now, at the end of 2016, U-47-700 became illegal. So what do you think the Chinese chemical companies decided to do when U-47-700 became illegal? Well, let's see. We're skipping one here, but what do you think they're making now? U-49-900 and U-48-800. All they did is change the chemical formula just enough so that it wasn't illegal. You can buy U-49-900 online and have it shipped to your mailbox without any problems. Because the law, we're trying to change the law so we can create a law that can say all these things that are trying to do the following should be illegal. But right now the law is so particular about these narcotics that we have to sit there and say, hey, that molecule has to look exactly like this for it to be illegal. So these dope dealers realize that I just need to keep ordering stuff from China and putting in pills. People are going to get high. I'm going to make my money, even if it kills them. So this is what a typical pill mill looks like. This is one we got here in Houston. This is 4 machines that are plugged in. They got hoppers on them. You put the powder in there, and you can make any pill. These crank out about 5,000 pills an hour. And these pills will look exactly like a real pharmaceutical grade pill. As the end user, you can't tell the difference. And that's what very few people die from a hydrocodone overdose when they take real hydrocodones. The only people that do are the ones that decide they want to kill themselves by taking way too many. Most of them die because they bought one from a friend, and it turned out it wasn't a real pill. It was a pill that was made to look like the real pill, but it had fentanyl or U-47-700 or carfentanil in it. You can buy anything that you want right here. Watson 853s, there are hydrocodones, Vicodins, morphine pills, or you can even have it look like a Mario or a Hello Kitty or a Xanax. We took down a pill mill where the guy, you would call him up and say, hey, I want 1,000 blue Hello Kitties. And then he would call you later in the day, I got your pills ready. And I want 5,000 Watson 853s, but instead of making them blue, I want them to be purple. Okay, I can do that too. That guy made so much money that by the time we had a chance to shut him down, we took 12 cars from him, 4 houses, and an airplane. And the guy didn't have a college education. He just realized that the market, the number of addicts that we had in the Houston area, would support his business plan. So these are on the internet. They look exactly like the real deal. But this guy's even telling you, I'm just letting you know, these are actually fentanyl pills made to look like the real deal. So be careful, because if you take one of these, it may kill you. And people are still buying them. So typically sometimes I can get on the internet and I can show you, I can just get on the regular internet and I can show you where you can buy heroin, where you can buy LSD, where you can buy ecstasy, just on the regular internet. And you can buy fentanyl. I don't have to go to the dark web. I don't have to go do some anonymous crazy stuff on the internet. I can just go on the internet and type in, I want to buy heroin, and you'll be surprised how many websites pop up where you can buy heroin. But they call it not heroin, they call it something like a research chemical. And then you just have to attest that you are a scientist. Well, if you're an addict, do you have any problems lying to a company and saying that you're a scientist? You lie all day long because that's how you get your money. Right? You lie to your mom or your dad. You lie to your boss. That's how we get paid. So what have we done? How has this changed the way that we do stuff as far as the police department is concerned? So because the pills and the narcotics out there are so dangerous, we don't want our officers touching it anymore. In the past, we used to do field tests, right? We take a little bit, put in a little test tube, we'd shake it, and it would give us a presumptive indication, or we'd sit there and say, it's very likely that whatever you got is heroin or cocaine or meth or anything along those lines. Because we don't want our officers touching narcotics anymore, we don't want to run the risk of them trying to get a little bit of heroin out and put in a test tube. We just sit there and tell them, tell me what you think it is, based on your experience, how you found it, where you found it, did the guy say anything to you, what does it look like to you? So then, and then we put it in the lab, and then we wait for the lab results to come back. But in the meantime, the DA's office will take a charge if the officer says, hey, it looked like heroin, the way that the guy was handling it or the way it was packaged made me believe it was heroin, and the guy even told me it was heroin. So we're able to charge people without the field test because it's too dangerous for us to perform field tests. So we issue gloves to everybody. We make sure that the nitrile gloves, latex gloves aren't good enough. We make sure that officers have little respirator masks available to them. So if they go into a place where potentially there may be some powder, for example, a vice officer I talked to one day, they went to arrest a prostitute. And when she realized she was going to be arrested, she had some heroin, and she threw it in the air to make sure it all dissipated. Well, for us officers, that becomes very dangerous if it turns out it has, heroin in it by itself for non-addicts is very dangerous. But if it has fentanyl in it, it becomes actually lethal, right? So we provide little respirators for our officers. The other thing we started doing, every officer now has 2 doses of Narcan that's issued to them. And Narcan is the antidote for an opioid overdose. So the way it works is you got these receptors in your brain, and then the opioid comes in and grabs onto the receptor, and that makes you feel high. It makes you, the opioid starts working. So when it grabs a hold of these receptors and it's working, if it turns out that the opioid is fentanyl, it's going to keep hanging on to eventually you die. So Narcan, when it makes it into the system, wedges between the opioid and the receptor, so you go from overdosing to being completely sober. Right? So every officer has 2 doses that are assigned to him. It is expensive. It's $75 for 2 doses, and that's police price. It's police price. If you can go, if you have a family member that's an addict, you can go to CVS or Walgreens and you can buy it over the counter. There's a doctor in Austin that wrote a prescription to every person, every resident of Texas to be able to buy Narcan. And who do you think is the most likely buyer of Narcan at CVS or Walgreens? Who do you think buys more Narcan than anyone else? Parents. You know why? Because if you're a parent of an addict, you don't want your kid to die at home. Right? There's not a parent out there that says, you know, my Johnny, he's the best pill popper ever. No, we don't want our kids to be addicts. We know that we're just hoping, we're praying for the day that Johnny realizes and he sees the mistakes and he tries to get some counseling, he tries to find a different way of handling his problems. But in the meantime, if he happen to overdose at home, at least they can try to save his life. Right? So the other thing that we have started doing, and this is the difficult part for the police department, and I recognize this, and the captain and I have talked about this, that we are trying to have officers recognize that there's a difference between the addicts of old and the addicts of new. And that we need to maybe recognize that most of these people that we come across now got started because they went to a doctor. And that we should recognize that maybe the old way of doing things didn't work for us. That taking generations out of a neighborhood didn't solve our problems. And so the new way of us trying to do stuff is we have applied for a grant that we're going to get, where we're going to try to sit there and maybe once we make these overdose calls, that we can introduce those people to people in the community, like lifestyle coaches or substance abuse counselors, and get those people, when we save them from the brink of death because they almost died from their overdose, maybe that's the lowest of the low they've ever been, and then get them to someone that can help them and figure out how they need to learn to stay sober. And we're going to see if that's going to work, because we know the alternative hasn't worked. Do I personally think that putting people in jail sometimes works? Absolutely. Because sometimes that is the load that people need to experience. And also that is sometimes for people and family members specifically, that is the only good night they're going to have, is when they know that their loved one is being cared for by someone else. And they're not running around on the street and not doing something they shouldn't be doing. It's crappy that they're in jail, but at least they're being monitored. And so we're trying to find a happy median where we can sit there and say, hey, those that we can sort of get to, can we introduce them to the other side of the house, which is going to be people that can provide services to them. You know, we're police officers. We're public servants. We're law enforcement officers, but we're not substance abuse counselors. I know a little bit about substance abuse. I'm not an addict, but I have a family member that's an addict. So I recognize, I know a little bit of how it works out, but I'm not a counselor. What we want to try to do now is maybe if we start partnering up and we start identifying these people through police calls, hey, this is the 4th time we've been here. She's always high as a kite because she's an opioid abuser. What can we do to maybe introduce her to someone that can start trying to help her? Because making the same call and trying to talk to her all the time is not working. As police officers, this is the misconception that people have. You call us for a problem, we come over there and we have 15 minutes out of your day, out of your life, and we're going to sometimes try to solve decades worth of problems between husbands and wives or family members. It's impossible. When it comes to treating substance abuse, I can't identify what that person started using, And even if I knew what they started using, I don't have the resources personally to try to help that person. But there are people out there. And so that's one of the new approaches that we're trying to do is see what can we do to get those people there quicker. We're going to see if it works. So what are the signs for an opioid? Well, an opioid, morphine is what we give to people when they're in a phenomenal amount of pain. It makes us go to sleep. An opioid, by its definition, is a sedative. We use fentanyl for surgery. Right? We use morphine for pain management. So basically, the signs of an opioid overdose is someone's going to sleep. Their heart rate slows down, their breathing slows down, they have pinpoint pupils, their muscles become so relaxed that they can't even sit up anymore. They try to hold themselves up, they fall down. Those are the symptoms of an opioid overdose. So what we tell our officers, if you're not sure if someone's overdosing, since Narcan has no ill side effects, that if you are wrong, it won't hurt anybody. If you think someone's overdosing, give them the Narcan we've issued to you. Right? And I will say this, our officers so far this year have changed or have saved 10 people's lives who either were dead or dying from an overdose by giving them Narcan. And that is something I think that is pretty cool. Because that's something in 2017 that we weren't doing. Anything before 2017, we waited for the fire department to get there. And sometimes they got there in time, and sometimes they didn't. We have 10 officers on this department that were the first one to make it to someone that was dead or dying from an opioid overdose. We were able to give them the medicines so that they could make it to the hospital and recover. And this was our very first one. So I'm going to call her Jenny today because of all these HIPAA laws. I can't use her real name. But one of the beautiful things of the body cams is we capture this whole thing on video. And the officer walks in, and that's her laying on the floor of a hotel room. It's a 22-year-old girl. She's got a 2-year-old kid, and she's an addict. She knows she's an addict. She doesn't pretend not to be an addict. She makes no excuses for it. But she did get started because at one point she had surgery. And the doctor prescribed it to her, and now she can't figure out how to quit. She was doing well, and then that monkey got on her back again, and on New Year's Eve, she hung out with a friend, and the addiction took over. I don't understand addiction. If I go to a restaurant and have dinner with my wife, and I say, hey, I'm going to have a beer tonight, I can have a beer, and I can stop because I know I have to go to work the next day. But if you're an addict and you have your one beer, then you're going to drink that night till you pass out. An addict, that gene, that part in their gene that's supposed to tell them now it's time to stop, doesn't work. So they go from either nothing to everything. And that's what happened with her. On New Year's Eve, things weren't going well for her. Somebody gave her something that wasn't what it's supposed to be, and she overdosed. We've showed this video to some doctors, and they all agree, as the officer walks in, you watch her take her last breath. And I've talked to her. My partner and I have talked to her. She knows she died. And the officer came in, he had his Narcan, he put it in her nose, and 3 minutes later, she's talking to him. And the cool thing about this, as badass as we think we are sometimes as policemen, when Steve and I went to talk to her, and I said, hey, I know the officer that gave you the Narcan that night. She goes, if I ever have a chance to talk to him, I just want to thank him for giving me a second chance, because there's nothing more I want out of life than to be a good parent to my son. I know I'm going to get there. I just don't know how yet. And so I said, it's funny, because I have the officer, I got his number on my phone. I'll call him for you. And she, when she talked to him, told him, I know I died. The doctors told me I died. When I made it to the hospital, they told me I died. I'm only here because of what you did for me. And I just want to thank you for not passing judgment on me. You didn't know anything about me, but you decided to come in there and do what was right. And he's on the other side of the phone choking back his tears, because I bet you it's got to feel pretty awesome when someone calls you and says, if it wasn't but for what you did for me, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't because of what you did, my son would be an orphan today. So our officers do a phenomenal job. So what can you do? Well, I would bet you in this group right here, there is somebody that's got a family member or a friend or somebody that goes to your church that's an addict, specifically addicted to an opioid, not crack cocaine, but because the doctors have prescribed it so often and so much, it is running rampant in our communities, right? So when you go visit those people, don't touch anything, because what happens with the people that are hardcore addicts, they start buying these pills from friends who got them from friends, and a lot of the pills that are out there nowadays are not what they're supposed to be. So if you visit those people, if you counsel those people, if you know you have someone like that in your family, don't touch their product. If you have a grandson or a son or a daughter and they come to your house and they left a pill on the counter, then take a glove, take a piece of paper, and put it in the trash, flush it down the toilet, but don't pick up pills that you don't know up with your bare hands, because these pills aren't what you think they are anymore. All right? So you make it to the houses and you see a bunch of stuff in there. I mean, don't touch. You go to an addict's house, you go to a person that you believe may have some problems, don't touch their dusty table, because inside that dust is going to be some particles of some opioid probably, and there's a chance that you could get it into your system. Even if you say, hey, I'm not going to lick my finger, but if at some point your eye itches and you just rub it, you can easily get it in your eyes. If you can still do this, or don't rub your eyes. If you still can do this, then don't do that either. You know, if you're arresting it, you can still lick your elbow, stop. You know, because you don't know what's on that table. Don't lick the countertops. You know, you go to that person's house, just sit there and let things be. And this is the last thing. Bravery is the capacity to perform properly even when scared half to death. And that's our police officers. One of the last things I want to say real quick, and then I hope you have some questions for me, is that I got a pretty badass job. I love my job. I have a chance to sit there and make a real difference in this communities. I have no problem putting people in jail. But I will tell you this, and I spent 9 years on SWAT, and that was a hoot, and it was just a ball of fire. But the most dangerous job that we have in the police department are those people that show up when you call 911. And I just want you to appreciate those are the young officers in the department and some veteran officers that just recognize the value that they have. But by far, the most dangerous and most difficult job that we have within this police department is being just a regular patrol officer, except for supervising me, because I know I can be very difficult too. I'm just kidding. So I'm going to make a real note real quick, and then I'll answer your questions. The problem that we have sometimes is people will say, well, you know, if we arrest people, we can sit there and force them to go into rehab. The problem with that is the girl that we talked about, she knows she's an addict. She wants help. She can't get a bed because she doesn't have insurance. And all the beds are taken up with people that have been arrested for a possession charge. And their choice became, do you want to go to rehab or do you want to go to prison? And what do you think 100% of those people pick? They pick rehab. Do you think their heart was in the right place when they picked rehab? No, they picked rehab because prison's even worse. And so a person like the girl we saw wants a bed, is ready for a bed, needs a bed, but can't find a bed because we've given them away in the hope that people that weren't ready were ready after all. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, the answer is more beds, obviously. But I don't, more money. I don't know what the answer is. All right, anybody got any questions? Anything dope related?
What can you get a film like that shown in the schools?
You know, I didn't expect that question, but I found it an interesting question. So, within the police department, this has been a very difficult topic to teach because part of what we have to recognize is that we have to change as a police department. We have to recognize that there's more to this problem than just either putting people in jail or doing nothing. You know, so it's very difficult for some officers to recognize that we need to start partnering with churches and we need to start partnering with support groups that can provide services that we're not capable of handling. I 100% agree that this should be in schools, but instead we're more worried about teaching them, you know, how bad sex is not before marriage and how some of the other things are not. If we're not teaching them math and writing and reading and all of those stuff, we need to tell these kids how dangerous it is out there, and not about how it's okay to do all the other things that when we were kids was not okay. Because as it turns out, we turned out to be a pretty good generation. Why don't we just go back to what worked for us? I agree with you. It should be. I would suspect if someone were to call me and say, "Hey, Eric, do you want to come talk to my social studies class one day?" I'd be more than happy to come up and talk to a social studies class one day. Just like when I was a SWAT officer, I would talk to classes about, what it was like to be a SWAT officer. I don't see why it'd be a problem if someone reached out to the police department and said, "Hey, can I get Eric Termulin to come talk to my civics class?" And then I would talk to him about whatever. I'm not going to lie to him, but I'll talk to him about the things that matter. And right now, this matters. Today, this is very fresh and new. Today, I had a chance to have an opioid conference in town right now. And I had a chance to listen to the lady that's the Health and Human Services Director of the Opioid Response out of Austin. So she works out of the governor's office. Texas, in every category, below the national average when it comes to opioid abuse. Right? We have heroin abuse. It was two statistics: heroin abuse and then other opioids, specifically the painkiller, the abuse of pain management abuse pills, right? The pain management pills abuse. In every category, we were lower than the national average when it came to the percentage of kids that have abused opioids or heroin, except for the 12 to 17-year range. Texas exceeds the use prescription medication. And that's sort of scary because that is our next generation. That is exactly the people that she is asking about.
I hate to get out of the post but what she was saying, when we had a lot of 5X in the city of Houston, we had to deal with HISD and all of them. And the 5 deal went down, we gave away smoke detectors. And we installed them on weekends. And even before she said, that's the only way to reach the masses. We did it with elementary, and so when we got to the middle school, we said, "Hey, Miss Bingham, you came to our school again." So it wasn't a pressing need to do it in the middle school because they got it in elementary for 3 grades. And so what she's saying is really valid. Those opioids and what have you, if you can get them while they're young, they're okay. So just like they say, if the gang member can get you young, it's hard to get out when you're old. And that is the only way that I was seeing. When a problem come, when we had the AIDS, and it came in the fight, we didn't know what to do. We were all wearing gloves and masks. And then when we got a hold of it, then we were okay. We got to start from the very bottom.
And I 100% agree. And the difference is between the fire and this problem right here. People, like any kind of addiction, we want to act like it doesn't exist. And that's the part. I'm 100%, I get what you're saying, and I even agree with what you're saying. But as a society, when we have, not as an individual, not me personally, but as a society, we tend to look at people that are addicts as someone just slightly less than what we are. It's not right, because we now know that many of those people, it's some defect in the gene. And so what we need to do is change that attitude. And I agree, if we just start so young that no one knows any different.
You dealt with 2 things, system and the cause. The only thing getting out of the tax code is one.
Right.
It's the little people. The little people that grow up and they have a knowledge of it. It's bad, opioid, dope, and that's it. So wherever the mother, father is doing, and it's not right, they'll say it's not right. So we just had a contract with the school. We need to get 5 stop, drop, and roll, and we'll give smoke detector
I think it's
everything went down because we got them at an early age, something
Captain?
34.
At your next crime strategy meeting, I guarantee that it's something that we probably need to do. I agree that if we start reaching out to HISD and just start getting some kind of plan, and when we have, whether it's your DRT people or just get a group of officers that can sit there and start making calls at the schools and start teaching some of these classes.
Our third grade come in,
Yeah.
and our fourth grade was like that. It was like a assembly in the cafeteria, and then we found out, wow, our desk went down, and then we gave them a call. Not to them, but their parents.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the old, what was it?
Okay,
It's
this
like the
video
old
is
DARE
coming to
program.
an end. This is the
But it went away,
opioid
now it's called grade for grade or
epidemic.
something along those lines. But I think that's it's an awesome point, and I think that, somebody needs to bring that.
Thank you for
It's a
watching.
project that